Hello my friends, and welcome to the Curate Study for this week's Wondering Wednesday. And this week I've been wondering, along with quite a lot of other people I should imagine, why does it take so long to get anything done as far as building work is concerned or alterations within a Church of England church? So if you've had anything to do with a project in a Church of England building, you will know that the amount of time, energy and paperwork required can be considerable. And this tends to surprise a lot of people when they join a parochial church council, which is the body of men and women who volunteer to help look after a parish church. Because many people assume it's a bit like a house. If you want to do a minor project, you can just do it. But if you want to knock walls down and put a new building up, you have to apply for planning permission. So how does it work? Well, it's complicated. The first thing to bear in mind, of course, is that our church buildings are often ancient, full of architecture and artifacts that are historically significant and precious to large numbers of people. Many of them are listed buildings, and if you don't know what listed building status is, listed buildings are buildings whose, because of the nature of the building, its age predominantly, or characteristics, are registered with a government body which controls modifications, alterations or improvements to that building. So the Church of England has a process called the faculty system. This is a process that allows the Church of England to care for its alterations to its buildings outside of the secular listed building and planning permission process. I'm going to have to read some of this because it's a little bit complicated. So if a parish wishes to make alterations to the church, discussions first have to take place with the local archdeacon. And if you don't know what an archdeacon is, if you scroll back about half a dozen Wondering Wednesdays, I do a little bit of an explanation of the sort of hierarchical levels of the church, and you'll find out back there what an archdeacon is and what they do. So if the changes proposed are relatively minor and you submit to the correct paperwork, your local archdeacon can give approval for them. But if they're in any way major or they involve changes to the fabric of the building, it gets a lot more complicated. So there is a legal process that needs to be complied with, whereby the Chancellor of the particular diocese that contains your church, in our case the Diocese of Exeter, has to authorise the works. And if authority is granted, what is given to the church is what is known as a faculty, and that allows the work to go ahead. So the Chancellor is advised on technical matters by a voluntary group of individuals called the Diocesan Advisory Committee, snappy title, and this will contain experts, architects, surveyors, structural engineers, experts on woodwork, for example. And they will usually be overseen by salaried officials from the diocese who will liaise between them and interested parties such as the church. And the faculty system is both rigorous and often extremely complicated. So when a faculty is submitted, it must be supported by a whole range of supplementary evidence, such as statement of needs, specialist reports, detailed plans, not just showing what you're going to do, but justifying why you want to do something. And there will often be a range of other parties that need to be consulted in the process. Certainly members of the public within your parishes or parish will need to be consulted, but also possibly Historic England, who control the listed building status of any particular ancient building. Maybe someone like the Victorian Society, if your church has particular Victorian aspects to it that they might wish to advise upon. And then, of course, as I say, there's a public consultation period, because although the churches may theoretically be vested in the incumbent, the priest, and the parochial church council, they are really the property of everybody within the parish. And often parishioners will harbour very strong views about what should and shouldn't happen in what they consider to be their church. Ironically, actually, often it's the people that come to church the least that have the strongest views on what should and shouldn't happen within any particular parish church. So a typical faculty might work something like this. Okay, so the church has a regular coffee morning. but doesn't have sufficient space for it because it's grown increasingly popular. And the regular churchgoers and the PCC consider this and decide they'd like to create more space. This may involve moving or removing pews to create, say, a servery, for example, and room for chairs and tables. So the PCC would theoretically initially consult with the wider parish through perhaps a questionnaire about the sort of facilities parishioners might be interested in. They may have a public meeting or possibly even several public meetings and then collate all that information. The PCC would then consult the DAC, the Diocesan Advisory Committee on Advice. Quite possibly the DAC would send some of its representatives to come and see the church firsthand and talk through the plans that the PCC, the Parochial Church Council, and the priest has. At that point, they might advise further consultation with outside bodies such as Historic England, Victorian England, so on and so forth. The PCC would then consult an architect for detailed plans, and they would prepare the faculty application and draw together the consultation results, perhaps a statement of needs, details of any historic features of the building that would be affected, advice from other bodies consulted, architects' plans, costings, photographs, etc., etc. The DAC would then either decide to support or oppose the application based on the evidence submitted and the views of the experts who volunteered their services in times very kindly to support the DAC. The Chancellor would then decide on granting or rejecting the application based upon all the evidence that was submitted. Now, it is generally a lengthy and time-consuming process, and I don't know of any priests or PCCs who don't at some point in their governance of a parish church have cause to express frustration about the complicated nature of the process and the cost that can be involved as well, because the more people you consult often, the greater the cost can be. But undertaking work without a faculty can be a breach of a number of different ranges of legislation. So you can in fact be in breach of civil law, some form of trespass, the possibility of criminal law being breached as well, with a view to things like criminal damage, for example. And for the priest in charge, it would probably result in action against them under the clergy discipline regulations. So the faculty process and this sort of legislation is not something to be mucked about lightly. And of course, over and above all of that, that the Parochial Church Council and the incumbent of the church are just stewards of that particular building, having received its care from those who went before them and being responsible for care of it to those to whom they will pass it on to, future generations, hopefully stretching forward as long as the building is stretched back. So it's not something to be taken lightly. I hope that's proved to be an interesting and useful insight into the exciting world of the faculty process. In several of our churches at the moment, we are consulting on the possibilities of faculties. One for a restructuring, a reordering to make the building what we consider to be fit for purpose. Two others because of damage to the building through weather and time that need to be resolved, one urgently and one less so. And receiving, it has to be said, some really, really good support from both the Archdeacon and the DAC. Maybe in a future Wondering Wednesday, we could talk through those particular cases and give you an example of the pitfalls of the process. Anyway, I hope it's been useful for you. So until we meet again, my friends, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. God bless.